The Legend of Nabu, a Sumerian tale of debt and redemption. Imagine a time before kings and empires, before money even existed. A time when your wealth was counted in sacks of barley and your fate rested in the hands of temple priests. This is the story of Nabu, a humble Sumerian farmer, whose determination, wit, and sheer will turned a life-crushing debt into a legend that would be told for generations. But how did a simple farmer become a hero? And what happens when you owe a debt not just to a man, but to the gods themselves? Let's travel back 5,000 years, to the land between the rivers, where Nabu's fate hangs by a thread, and the weight of barley could tip the scales. In the grand city of Uruk, where the temples stood like mountains, there lived a farmer named Nabu. He wasn't rich nor powerful, just a man who worked his land, hoping for a good harvest. But life, as it often does, had other plans. A season of floods had ruined his crops the year before, leaving him with no choice but to borrow from the temple granaries. The high priest, a man draped in golden robes and a beard as long as a river, had agreed, but at a cost. "Repay the temple in full by next harvest," the priest had decreed, "or suffer the god's wrath." The god's wrath, Nabu knew, likely meant losing his farm, his home, maybe even his freedom. Now, with the harvest season approaching, the pressure was mounting. Would the barley be enough? Would the temple accept his payment? Or would his fate take a turn for the worse? Nabu wasn't one to wait for luck. He had spent months working harder than ever, praying for good weather, using every trick he knew to make the barley grow tall and strong. And yet, as he walked his fields, scanning the golden stalks, he felt the weight of uncertainty. He knew the temple priests would inspect every grain. Would they find it lacking? Would they claim he had fallen short? But Nabu had a plan, a risky one. If his barley alone wasn't enough, he would outsmart the temple, not with trickery, but with something even more powerful. Ingenuity. Harvest day arrived. The fields had given all they could, and Nabu loaded his cart with every last grain. The wooden wheels groaned under the weight as he set off toward the towering ziggurat of Uruk. The road was long, the sun relentless. Other farmers traveled alongside him, their carts filled with barley, their faces tense with worry. The temple's demands were steep, and no one wanted to fall short. But Nabu? Nabu carried something more than just barley. He carried a secret, a gamble that could change everything. The temple courtyard was a sea of desperate farmers, each waiting their turn. The high priest stood at the top of the stone steps, watching as sacks of barley were weighed, measured, and judged. One by one, farmers stepped forward. Some left relieved, their debts cleared. Others, not so lucky, were met with cold stares and murmurs of disapproval. Then it was Nabu's turn. The priest's eyes narrowed as the sacks were unloaded. He inspected the grains, running them through his fingers, weighing them carefully. Silence stretched. Then he spoke. "This is acceptable." A breath Nabu didn't know he was holding escaped him. He had done it. He had paid his debt. But he wasn't finished yet. Instead of simply bowing and leaving like the others, Nabu did something unexpected. He reached into his cart and pulled out one final sack. "A gift for the temple," he said. "A token of gratitude for the gods." A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one gave extra. They only gave what was demanded. The high priest raised an eyebrow but accepted the offering, and in that moment, something changed. Nabu wasn't just another farmer clearing his debt. He was a man who had given willingly, a gesture the gods would not forget. Word of Nabu's act spread. He was no longer just a farmer. He was the man who had not only repaid his debt but had given more than required. The priests spoke his name in respect, and the farmers whispered his story with admiration. And the next year, when the temple needed a trusted hand to oversee the grain stores, who did they call upon? Nabu. From a man burdened by debt to a figure of honor, his story became legend. A reminder that sometimes the best way to overcome hardship isn't just by meeting expectations, but by exceeding them. And so, Nabu's tale lives on, a story whispered through time from the fields of ancient Sumer to the world we know today. Debt, struggle, redemption. The same battles fought by a Sumerian farmer 5,000 years ago still echo in our lives today. But maybe, just maybe, the lesson remains the same. When faced with hardship, do more than expected. Because sometimes the smallest extra effort can turn a burden into a legacy. So tell me, if you were in Nabu's shoes, what would you have done? Thank you for watching, and until next time, remember, history is full of lessons, if we're willing to listen.